have to see how the theory of state is emerging over a period of time. When it comes to Mauryans, it is not a sudden development. Already certain kinds of state theories and ideas were already there in India. We are in 321 BC. Suppose in 321 BC and 185 BC, this is Mauryan time period. Now, in this time period, we have a source. When it comes to history, always you should first remember whatever we are knowing about history, what is the source? How do we know about something that happened thousands of years ago? When it comes to this, Kautilya's Ardhashastra. Kautilya's Ardhashastra is the source to understand about political administration of Mauryans. But whatever Kautilya is saying in Ardhashastra, it is not sudden development. Always in our history, nothing is going to be a sudden one. Some kind of background definitely will be there. Before 321, now if we go back to 600 BC, now this time period we are calling Mahajanapada time period. And in fact, before this, this is first Pan-India empire. And before this, so many kingdoms. There were so many kingdoms, and in that Magadha became very powerful. Magadha started conquering all these kingdoms and became big empire for the first time in history, almost entire Indian subcontinent. Here also, these kings were following certain kind of political administration. Again, whatever they are following, it is not something new. They were building on top of what was happening earlier. 1000 BC. Between 1000 to 600, we are calling later Vedic. When it comes to Mahajanapada time period, we have seen monarchy, and another one is republic. Two types of broad systems. We have already seen that monarchy type of system and republic type of system. We have seen even the differences also between monarchy and republic. This republic, even though the term is modern, but it has some differences with the modern republic and 6th century BC republic. Those differences also we have seen. When it comes to later Vedic time period, this again, it has given certain elements and they were built upon what was happening earlier. This we call early Vedic. For example, here Rajan or chief, it was a tribal society. They were electing. And when it comes to this, it became hereditary. And this hereditary position continued for rest of the period. Now you see this, in early Vedic time period, they were electing. Yes, Tarun, oligarchy based. In early Vedic time period, they were electing. And when it comes to later Vedic time period, it became hereditary. From the single family, ruler is being ruled. Mahajanapada time period also, same thing is happening, and Kautilya Ardhashastra. Now it goes on. Throughout our Indian history, this hereditary kingship became normal practice. But again, it is not always that people will support from the same family. Because there are references in our literature that if suppose king is not a worthy, or king is not doing according to the requirement of the state, if people are suffering very high, in those times, people can overthrow the king and a new king can be established. That kind of idea is also there in our Indian history. Those references, how do we know that this reference? In this later Vedic time period, we have texts, early Vedic Vedas, later Vedic also other Vedas, Brahmanas, Upanishads, Samhitas, Aranyakas, Brahmanas, Upanishads are the important literature during later Vedic time period. These Brahmanas and Upanishads, they talk about the kingship, how a king should be, what are the qualities of a king, and how people should behave if there is a good king or if there is a bad king, what people should do. Even they say that people have the right to overthrow the king if king is not fulfilling the requirement of the state. That kind of references are also there in Brahmanas and Upanishads. Please note down up to here, then I will go to the next one. Now we are going to trace, this is particularly important to understand many political systems in the modern times. That I will explain later. Please note down up to here and let me know if it is done. We need to go back to this old map. Greek people are known for the philosophy. When it comes to Alexander time period, even much before Alexander, the knowledge became very one of the important components in Greek society also. Like in case of Indian society, Vedas, later Vedic text. Again, this knowledge is very common and also very people were interested in the philosophical aspects. Like this, here also we find different people like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and these people were contemporary to Alexander or just before Alexander. You can say when Magadha Empire was expanding, and these people were contemporary to that development. After Buddha, this became foundation for the Western political system. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, you are going to read in ethics also. Whatever they were saying about the state, how a state should be, and first of all, how state came into the formation, what are the rulers' duties, what are the people duties and rights, some kind of idea they began. And later when religion dominated, the despotism became common practice across Europe also and throughout the world history. After a long time, when Enlightenment started, in 17th and 18th centuries, it is more of 18th and 19th centuries. During this time period, they once again brought back these ideals. For example, when it comes to India, now go back to Vedic time period, Dayananda Saraswati. You can see that in 19th century, once again, socio-religious reformers, they started talking about ancient developments, that there were good elements in ancient history. Now today there are some evils in the society. If we want to learn good lessons from our own history, go back to ancient time. Same is the case when it comes to Enlightenment phase also. They were talking about this and they were giving new ideas also. When it comes to this phase, in France, for example, Rousseau. When it comes to here in England also, much before in the western part, these Enlightenment started. United Kingdom, already some liberal tradition was going on for a very long time. If you remember, if you have some idea that Magna Carta, do you have any idea about Magna Carta? Have you heard this term, any of you? Magna Carta. It is in 1215, there was an agreement between king and the nobles. It is not the people as such. When it comes to people, we are calling democracy. In democracy, people are powerful, common people are powerful. But up to this modern democratic concept, common people are not powerful, but the rulers and nobles. In 1215, rulers and nobles, they were having agreement that nobles should be given, or powers of the ruler should come down, and nobles and other people should get some kind of rights. And in fact, comparing with other parts of the world, that was revolutionary. It became Magna Carta. We often use this term even in our Indian constitution also, in our polity also. You are going to see fundamental rights, Magna Carta of Indian constitution. From that time period onwards, they started talking about the liberal principles of what should be the relationship between king and the people. And John Locke, he gave liberal principles. Locke principles and Rousseau principles, they impacted when America got independence. After 1783, America got independence. They established the concept republic system. This is the modern concept of republic. That means king will not be the head of the state. Common people, one of the person from common people become the head of the state. Republic system, democracy, and separation of powers. Judiciary is different, executive is different, legislature is different. If every power, judiciary, executive, legislature, if they are there in the same hand, then autocracy will emerge, authoritarianism will emerge, despotism will emerge. They wanted to separate it, and these are the separate principles what Rousseau was giving. Rousseau and Montesquieu. In fact, this is the Montesquieu who gave this separation of power. When it comes to Rousseau, he has given a concept called social contract. Social contract. Any idea about social contract theory? In social contract, king is not a person who was appointed by the king, who was not appointed by the gods, but by the people itself. This social contract in Rousseau time period and Montesquieu, that means the Enlightenment phase, why they were telling these kind of concepts, why they wanted, Montesquieu is telling there should be different separation of powers. In our Indian constitution also, we followed these principles. Why they were talking about separation of powers, why they were talking about social contract? Because rulers were not behaving responsibly. Rulers left the welfare kept aside and they were enjoying in their own life, but they were not taking care of the people. People were suffering in poverty, disease, and other social evils. Law and order problem, all those important essential elements for stable society, they ignored, and the kings were enjoying in other world. So that is why these philosophers started talking about ruler should not behave this way, because ruler is not someone who was appointed by the gods, but by the common people. They should responsibly behave. These concepts emerged. Locke, Rousseau, Montesquieu, and these philosophies affected American system also. Later, after French Revolution, after 1789, in Europe also these philosophies emerged. It was the time period they started talking about this modern concepts of democracy and republic. And why I am explaining all this? Because in 18th century and 19th century, it showed great interest in the past. Was there any kind of social contract theory in our Indian system in ancient past? Who said this? Is there any such concept at all? Then separation of powers, is there any such concept? Because we were colonized people. They were always saying that India was always living in despotic rule. We don't know about democracy, we don't know about rights of the people, we don't know about the welfare of the people. But when our historians and even the British historians started looking more and more about India's past, they were coming to the conclusions that some of these concepts were already there in the Indian history. That is why you understand this, then only you will really appreciate what really, at this point of time, when Kautilya is saying something, how important it is for our Indian history. Please note down this, just to give broad picture, and you mention some of these elements, then I will give you the next element. You mention about particularly this social contract theory. Before that, theory of kingship. Divine rights of kings. Now, just to add one more thing. Plato, he has written even a book called Republic. Plato, he has written a book called Republic that inspired Enlightenment ages also. When America got independence, they got clues from this. So that is how Plato. Aristotle has written a book called Politics. These books, because they were talking about Greek republics, Athenian republics, this became a blueprint for the modern form of republic, American republic, French republic, and other countries' republic. And we were part of British Empire. British people were also propagating these ideas in India that our Western civilization is more advanced and our civilization is not advanced. That's why we came here to rule. That's why always to understand the better perspective of ancient history, we should see through the prism of modern India. Then only we really understand, because whatever ancient history we are studying, it was reconstructed during British time period. And as time passes, suppose after 50 years, after 100 years, if a new prism comes and our ancient Indian past is going to be looked in a different prism. But at this point of time, whatever ancient medieval India we are studying, it was seen through the prism of modern Indian writers. That is why we need to understand this. With this understanding, they were ruling us. Now it is very natural for the Indian socio-religious reformers, Indian historians, and Indian scholars to look back and see these people are degrading us. Really, are we that degraded people? So they were started looking the answers in our past. And they were coming to know that more and more developments. And in fact, some of these, the so-called modern elements were already there in ancient India. That is what we are going to see. Kautilya's Ardhashastra is one of such things. This is one thing. On top of it, add one more thing. Before Enlightenment, here there was a political philosopher called Machiavelli. In these Italian states, there was a person called Machiavelli, and he has told that ends are important. Instead of means, whatever may be the mean, but ultimately a king should do whatever he wants to do. That means and ends concepts emerged. Ultimately, the ends are important. The ruler can do anything as long as the ends are fulfilled. Later, when it comes to the philosophy, when it comes to ethics, then we are going to talking about means are equally good in comparing with ends. So this kind of concepts also emerged. This Machiavelli, he belongs to 16th century. Plato Republic, Aristotle Politics, likewise many Roman, even some of the Roman emperors, they were also philosophers. They were also talking about the political system. By 16th century, a person called Machiavelli, he talked about, once again, political system. And even today also, we often use this term, Machiavellian tactics. That means the kind of tactics used by the politicians in the present day, or in those times, the kings. In order to safeguard their power, authority, and their throne, they were following all such kind of immoral activities to safeguard their power and position. For example, if in the today's concept, if a politician following all such illegal or immoral means to stick to the power, we generally use this term using Machiavellian tactics. This is almost similar to this concept Kautilya Arthashastra also refers. That is why the British scholars have given the name Kautilya is also considered as Machiavelli of India. You mentioned this also. And the book he has written is The Prince. Only after understanding this, then we will appreciate our own past. Machiavelli Prince, 16th century. So on one hand, authoritarian. Machiavelli is propagating the authoritarian rule. On the other hand, people like Locke, Rousseau, Montesquieu, they were talking about liberty, freedom, equality, the modern form of fundamental rights, those concepts, the modern concepts. Now with this understanding, now shall I go? Because once I go back, this will be erased. That's why I'm waiting. All of you done this? If I go to the board, this will be erased. That's why I'm just waiting. If all of you have done it, then I'll go back. All right. All of you? Now we are in 3rd century BC. Now see this. 1500, 1000, 600, 3rd century, and 1st century, and so on. You draw one more timeline. This timeline will give us different type of political books in our Indian history. Text refer to politics. This is the foundation for our Indian political system. (1000 BC), 600 BC. At this time, Brahmanas, Upanishads, for example, Brahmanas, Upanishads, they were talking about the theory of kingship. Then 300 BC. Dharma Sutras. They were talking about how a ruler should behave, what is the dharma of king. 185 BC. Kautilya's Ardhashastra. This is how you have to say as a history optional student. For GS, we won't go this much. But as a history optional student, you should have this, because any kind of question, you will be able to give so many references. Evidence is all matters. If you give more evidences, whatever you are saying in history optional answer, you are bound to get more marks. And in our history, nothing develops out of vacuum. Always some kind of background will be there. On top of it, we are going to see some more additions. Now, 2nd century to 2nd century AD or 6th century AD, during this time period, various smritis developed. For example, Manusmriti, Yajnavalkya Smriti, Narada Smriti, only if we know these things, we will really appreciate what Kautilya is saying, how advanced Kautilya is. Narada Smriti, Niti Sara, Kamandaka, after 6th century AD, AD, then we have Somadeva Suri, Niti Vakyamrita, Niti Vakyamrita, then after 1200 to 1500 AD, and 1500 to say like 17, let us think like 1800 AD, for example. Now this time, Delhi Sultanate came, Parisian, theory of kingship, and during this time, Mughals, and in fact, we cannot even say up to 1800 also, because by 1700 itself, the Mughal got declined, you write. Up to 1750, you can write. Because from 1750 onwards, we see the influence of British, and gradually we are going to see. And in the early days of British also, up to 1784, for example, the Asiatic Society of Bengal. Why Asiatic Society of Bengal started? They wanted to understand our past. These things only they were reading. And this is Mughal theory of kingship. When this Mughal theory of kingship comes, this is like Turco, Mughal, Turco-Mongol, Mongol traditions, Turkic traditions, Central Asian traditions, Parisian traditions, Hindu traditions, and that is why when William Jones, when Supreme Court was established in India during British time period, before that Hindus were giving different type of judgments and Muslims were tried in a different type of judgments. And Supreme Court in the initial days also, they wanted to know about Muslim laws and Hindu laws. And what they were studying? Whatever we are seeing. These things only they were studying. And in 1950, to give this Indian Constitution. Now, today, Indian Constitution is the foundation book with new principles. It talks about the duties of ruler, duties of people, rights of the rulers, rights of the people. We will not use the term ruler, but the state. The duties of the state, the rights of the state. The duties of public, rights of the public. This is what Indian Constitution. And our fathers of Indian Constitution, they also studied about all these things. And after studying all these things, then they come to the conclusion that what is best for 21st century. Yes, Vijnaneshwara, Mitakshara, very good. So there are so many such examples. They were talking about how a state or a king should behave. And in fact, whatever they are talking, more or less, they were going to take reference to Kautilya's Ardhashastra. It has become like an encyclopedia for rest of the people who are talking. In 6th century or 10th century AD, in those times also they were talking about Kautilya's Ardhashastra, and only few additional things they were referring. And that is why I am giving emphasis on this particular part, because Kautilya's Ardhashastra laid the foundation for the rest of the time period. And even there is a debate that whether Kautilya's Ardhashastra was developed during Mauryan time period itself or not. Is it really belongs to Mauryan period itself? Or these ideas, some of these ideas developed in the history later time period, like post-Mauryans, or during early Gupta time period. The kind of language, the kind of Sanskrit language they were using in Kautilya's Ardhashastra, it developed during Gupta time period. And in some of the places in Kautilya's Ardhashastra, they mentioned, or Ardhashastra is mentioning a reference to China. But in case of Mauryan history, China nowhere comes. As of now, we are not talking about anywhere China. We are talking about Greece, we are talking about Parisians and Egypt. But we are not talking about China having the direct relationship between India and China. But Kautilya's Ardhashastra talks about that. What inference we can make? Is it really belongs to Mauryan period or somewhere near Gupta time period, but they were attributing to the Kautilya? It is like if someone wants to talk about Buddhism, some of the teachers or the philosophers used to say that Buddha said something like this. But really Buddha has said it or not also we don't know. Instead of saying as their words are told in the mouth of Kautilya. So that is how Kautilya's Ardhashastra also developed over a period of time. No doubt the initial idea belongs to the Mauryan time period, but some of the later developments also added to the Kautilya's Ardhashastra. And this Ardhashastra, whatever they are talking, whatever book is giving, that become foundation for the rest of the time period. And in fact, even today also, we once again reviving this tradition, Kautilya's Ardhashastra. Nowadays, it is becoming once again popular in our Indian politics. This is the context. Now you see this. Here, some of these elements, they also talk about, in addition to this whatever I am saying here, this Sanskrit text. After this time period, Buddhist texts. They also talk about the state system. Jaina texts, they also talk about the political system. This also gives idea, this also gives an idea. Both Brahmanical text, Buddhist text, Jaina text, all combinedly, they are talking about divine origin of kingship, or instead of saying types or nature. Divine origin of kingship, social contract. Both Brahmanical text, Jaina text, Buddhist text, in some places it is not that always only one particular theory is elaborated by these texts. Some say divine origin of theory of kingship and some say social contract theory. Both, in some places we find divine origin theory, in some places we see social contract. In fact, in Kautilya's Ardhashastra itself we are going to see these principles. Social contract and divine origin of kingship. When it comes to divine origin of kingship, now we need to go back to this time period. You just add one more list to this, Puranas. Puranas also, they used to explain the theory of kingship. They used to talk about many things, society also, economy also, politics also, and they also refer to these ideals. Now I will come back to this. Puranas, Brahmanas and Upanishads, just whatever epics you see, whether it is Mahabharata, Ramayana, indirectly they are referring, in Mahabharata, Ramayana also, they used to refer to these state systems. In some of the Brahmanas, some of the Upanishads, Mahabharata, Ramayana, Puranas, in anywhere if you see some kind of reference to the state system, you will observe that there were gods and there were demons. There were gods and demons. And in one of the Brahmanas, Aitareya Brahmana, in one of the Brahmanas called Aitareya Brahmana, in Aitareya Brahmana says, gives the evidence that how this king emerged. How king emerged. Now you see this. It appears, the story appears between gods and demons. But you have to apply, as a historian, you have to think the social context. This is how the challenge of historian. They are talking in terms of religion, in terms of imaginary stories, but in fact these kind of developments might be happening at the social level also. According to this Aitareya Brahmana, there was fight between gods and demons. Gods were fighting against the demons. And who are these gods and who are these demons? In the interpretation, those who follow Vedas and those who are establishing the social norms according to Vedas, they were called gods, and those who do not follow Vedas. Their aim is to protect the Vedas and Vedic tradition of life. And those who oppose this, when there was fight, gods were almost going to be defeated. Now they felt that when they were fighting, there was no leader. and they had a meeting and they found that they don't have one leader, and they elected one leader. And they elected one leader. This elected leader became king of gods. King of gods. Different versions give different traditions. In one incident, this elected king was Soma. He was elected. After becoming this king, they defeated demons, and this is how the kingship emerged. That means election. In simple terms, what we need to understand here? Election. In early Vedic time period, Brahmanas means later Vedic tradition. In early Vedic time period, we have seen that the king was elected. Whether it is God or other inhuman, it doesn't matter. But at the social level, people elected a person as a ruler, and what is their aim is to protect property, to protect people, to lead in wars and battles. Initially, king was considered that the purpose of king is to protect the people, property, and get victory in the wars. Later, when society changed, this thinking itself once again started changing. Now, from the election to the God themselves, gods are Prajapati. Later, the concept of Prajapati emerged. After some time, Brahmanas talked about, this time king was not elected. The gods went to Prajapati, and Prajapati himself appointed one person called Indra. And Indra became the king of gods. Now, from there onwards, Indra is the god. He is a god, and also he is the king of gods. Now, with this, if any king in Mahabharata, in Ramayana, in Puranas, any person, whoever is ruling, Kshatriya, this ruler used to be compared with Indra. That is how, that means Kshatriya is human being. But after becoming the king, this king used to be compared with Indra, and Indra was a god. That's why king became equal to the god. So this human being became God. And he was seen as either he himself as God or representative of the God. In our Indian tradition, it is not something new that treating kings as God. For example, this time period, now we are talking about this particular time period. Whatever story I am telling, this belongs to later Vedic tradition. And this later Vedic tradition entered into the later time periods also. And by 10th century, for example, by 10th century, if I give one reference, Cholas. In Chola time period, for kings, temples were constructed, and in these temples, king idol was worshipped. Best example is Brihadishwara temple, or in other places, Rajarajeshwara temple. What does it mean, Rajarajeshwara? Rajaraja is the king, but the king is now became the god. People started worshipping king as the god. How this? We are talking about the 10th century or 11th century. In 10th century, 11th century AD, this tradition is there, means Already this tradition must be there for very long time, and we are talking about almost 10th century BCE. 10th century BCE onwards, these type of traditions are emerging. By 10th century AD, almost after 1700 years, 1800 years also, we are seeing this tradition is continued. In fact, even today also, if a particular politician comes to the power for 20 years, 30 years, he will become like a god. And there are many references in the present 21st century only, the politicians, successful politicians are worshipped as gods. Then you think about 1,000 years before present, what kind of situation, how kings were treated. And this kingship, in a practical sense, the theory of kingship is considered as divine origin theory. In simple terms, divine origin theory, that means king appointed by gods, people should worship kings, and people should follow authority of kings, and it created fear and respect towards king, and this is how stability of the state ensured. Please mention this one. Mass sati in lieu of king's death. Yes, Tarun? So this kind of idea entrenched into such social evils as well. This is how kings, one more example I will give, Ashoka. He took the title Devanampiya. Devanampiya, what does it mean? Dear to gods. Dear to gods. Please mention this. Have you written this one? Please let me know which slide you need. I think this you might have done. This also you might have done. And this one, please note down this. Is anyone writing about the previous slide? Please let me know. This class is very, very important. Now onwards, whenever politics comes, whenever Politico administration comes, you please remember this particular class. This is very, very crucial, whether it is Guptas, post-Guptas, anyone. The origin of kingship is going to be this one, and thereafter, just we are going to refer to this particular description. So please ask me if you have any doubts in this particular part. Very, very crucial. These ideas and these ideology, you can simply say this ideology is going to rule entire ancient India and in fact medieval India also. Only name will change. Here, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and when it comes to medieval India, Islam, almost similar kind of ideology only. And if I just want to give one reference to medieval India, Balban took the title. Any one of you have idea that Balban, after Iltutmish, Balban comes? Balban took one title. Any one of you can remember if you have some idea? Zilai Ilahi, very good. That means the shadow of God. Remember? That means the shadow of God. If I write here, Balban, the description is shadow of God. So they are this is Balban. When it comes to Kushanas, Kanishka, Kushanas, they used to take the title Devaputra, the sons of God. Now you see, they won't, once you become the king, you are not equating with human beings, you are equating with God. Either you are representative of God, or either you are shadow of God, or you are directly son of God. So this shows how kings behave themselves. This is to establish the authority over the people. Please note down. Now that's why all these things, when it comes to Enlightenment time period, all these ideas were questioned. Why a human being should behave like a god when he is also a human being? This is why the concept of republics came. It is not a hereditary. It is not a state authority is not ruled by any single family or single person. It belongs to every people. That is what social contract theory is going to gain importance later. Have you written up to here? Please let me know. Then I will go to the next slide. Will it be correct to incorporate priest-king in divine origin traces? Are you talking about Harappan, Tarun? Harappan time period. Because Harappans, when it comes to Harappans, we don't know. We don't have any scriptures. When it comes to Vedas, Vedic time period, we have Rig Veda, we have Brahmanas, other Upanishads. But Harappans, we don't know. But we are seeing through this prism. When we are seeing through this prism, and a particular sculpture from Harappa, it appears like a king, and we are interpreting, probably this is the case. But no exact reference. Could you get the clarity? Whatever we are interpreting with respect to Harappan, it is only through this prism. Because already we have seen that there are so many debates whether Harappans are Vedic people or Vedic people in the initial days, they were Harappans. And when you want to equate Vedic people with Harappans, and that statue also appears like probably they were ruled by a priest king. But again, debates how far it is a priest king. So that debate is a continuous point. So whenever with respect to Harappa, always use the terminology probably. So these are the terms you have to use in the answer. Is it done up to here? Now come to this. You please note down this also. And this concept is very, very important, because in the titles, in later titles, whenever king is referred, we are going to see the name Ishvara. For example, Chalukyas, Pulakeshin II, he defeated Harshavardhana. Pulakeshin II defeated Harshavardhana. Pulakeshin II, Aihole Ravikirti inscription mentioned Harshavardhana as Uttarapadeshwara. So there are so many references. It is not a single reference. As we are going to discuss one after the other, you are going to see this ideology. That is why I am more emphasizing on this. In ancient India and medieval India, gods were gods and kings and gods almost equal. And in Puranas, we often see this gods versus demon conflict. Gods go to the Brahma or Vishnu, and Vishnu himself comes down as a king. For example, Ramavatar is a avatar of God in the form of king. Similarly, when it comes to Mahabharata, such stories are very common. Puranas, such stories are common. All these text epics are reinforcing this particular ideology. That is why king is considered as God. Manusmriti says, even if king is infant, even he is infant, he is representative of God. That's why people should respect the king. But modern concepts completely destroyed this myth, completely questioned this authority, that a king should be a responsible person, and the king is not. In fact, the kingdom, the kingship theory itself questioned. There should not be kings at all. Only people should rule themselves. Republic concepts emerged. This ideology is very, very crucial to understand it. Have you done up to here? Please ask me any doubts if you have. Because it is one of the most important aspects. This has shaped the entire world history itself. Not only Indian history, entire world history itself. And in fact, this ideology is not unique to Indian subcontinent alone. This concept is everywhere throughout the world. Europe also same problem. London also same problem. China also same issue. That is why in enlightenment phase, people started questioning it. And who are the representatives between gods and human beings? Priestly class. That is how priestly class also took the dominance over the society. In French Revolution, this is the structure that demolished completely during the French Revolution. So this concept is not only relevant for Indian content, Indian subcontinent, but entire world history itself. And this ideology shattered by enlightenment phase, it has shaped the modern world itself. All of you have mentioned this one. Now please note down this one. Yes, some kings used to consider themselves as gods. And people respect the king as the god. When king is so powerful, whenever kings are conquering the new territories, when they are conquering new territories and when they feel that they are powerful, no one is there to defeat them, sometimes they used to consider themselves as gods. Simply an appointee of God or equated with gods, depending on the king and depending on the time period. It keep on changed. Now I am talking about post Mauryan time period and before Mauryan time period. This kind of ideology was there. But in Kautilya's Ardhashastra itself, we see both tradition, social contract tradition as well as theory of kingship tradition. That's why there is no single way of looking at the kingship when it comes to Indian history. Different rulers, according to the time period, they behaved in different ways. Some consider them as representative of God, some considered themselves as gods, and some considered servant of the god, or some considered equal to human beings. Depending on the situation, kings used to behave that way. Title is only, we are understanding that only through title we are referring them that probably this king might have behaved this way. So title is for historians to understand what could be the theory of kingship followed by that particular king. So title is one way of understanding the nature of the kingship. And in medieval India, we are going to see the conflicts between Akbar and ulemas also. If you have some idea about medieval time period, this is the conflict between Akbar and ulemas. Ulemas always they are the true representatives of the God, and whatever they are saying about the God, only priestly class or ulemas, in medieval terminologies, ulema. Only ulemas have the authority to interpret what God is saying. But Akbar said, it is not ulema decides, and it is king himself decide what is God's word and what is important for the state. And that's why there were even assassination attempts also on the Akbar. There were revolts against Akbar. Same is the case in ancient India also. We don't have many references, but at least in medieval time we have some references, we are talking about it. And Harshavardhana time period also. And Harshavardhana, now this is mostly the Brahmanical text strongly believe in this theory. But Buddhism, they believe in the social contract theory. That's why if kings are very powerful, they generally don't consider all these. These are mostly theoretical. When it comes to the practice, kings followed their own way. The same thing we are going to see in Mauryans also. The purpose of emphasizing on this aspect is, this is what the existing tradition, this is the ideology, but really kings were following in a different way according to the times, according to the needs of the state. And in fact, Ashoka, he propagated his own dharma, Ashoka's Dhamma. Instead of following existing Brahmanical dharma, instead of following Buddhist dharma or Jain dharma, he created his own dharma. Akbar also created his own policy. What is the policy of Akbar? Sulhai Kul. This is how, when kings are powerful, they used to behave in a completely different way according to the needs of the state. But again, this is the theory, and we have to know about the fundamental ideology behind the kingship. When it comes to the modern time period, whatever this ideology in the present 21st century, we are following our Indian constitution. There are two terminologies when it comes to ruling or administering. Today we won't call rulers and all. We are calling state and administration. There are two terminologies. One is the constitution. Other one is constitutionalism. Constitution gives all the principles. How an administrator should behave, how executive should behave, legislature should behave, judiciary should behave, principles. All the ideas, all the principles. Constitutionalism refers to implementing these principles. Now, you see this. In 21st century, we got our constitution 1950, and we are in 2023. We have all the noble ideals, noble principles, the best in the world. We have as part of constitution. But how far these principles followed exactly? And in fact, this is one of the questions in our GS2 political, constitutionalism. If you truly follow this particular term you are going to use, this is letter of the constitution. And this is exactly implementation. following it. India is having the constitution, but Indian administration is following the constitutionalism or not. How far Indian administration is having 100% constitutionalism. 100% constitutionalism means each and every article of the constitution is respected, and each and every article of the constitution exactly followed by the administration. But there are so many violations. Constitution is saying something, but administrators are doing something. That means there is a gap between what constitution is saying, what the exact ground reality. That's why constitutionalism has to be inculcated in the administrators. Once you enter into the administration, you are going to see about constitutionalism, how these principles have to be implemented. Now, if in 21st century with all the modern ideals, we are having this gap between constitution and constitutionalism. And same you can expect in the ancient times also, medieval times also. The theory of kingship says something, but king might behave in a different way. Kings used to take these texts to further their interest. Some of them, they behaved in their own way. Some of them followed the constitution exactly. Some, they discarded the constitution. Some, they created their own constitution in ancient times and medieval times. Now also, it is the same issue. Only name is changing. Only just name. Now, Kautilya Ardhashastra becomes the constitution. If you follow Kautilya's Ardhashastra exactly, that means you are following the Kautilya's Ardhashastra in letter as well as spirit as it is. But in reality, that is not going to happen. There are so many changes. Ardhashastra gives so many ideals, but in reality, something else is happening. That is what we are going to see. Utopian idea. Yes, this is what expected. This is expected. Those who are writing this, they feel that if our society follows this, then it becomes an ideal society. Everyone will become happy. Ultimately, every person in the rule should be happy. And that's why in modern times, he used to say, Gandhiji used to say that we need Ramarajya. What does it Ramarajya means? Rama is considered as the avatar of God. In his rule, every person is happier and every person is performing their duties, and the king is a virtuous king, righteous king, and everything was going in order as per the constitution, in the aspect of constitution. But what is the constitution in Treta Yuga? That is according to Vedas. In modern times, Ramarajya doesn't mean we follow Vedas as it is. Ramarajya means if we follow the constitution in true spirit, that means Ramarajya. According to the times, our foundation concept keep on changing, and we have to follow these basic principles. Now come back to Mauryan time period. This fundamental to our Mauryan polity administration is the Kautilya's Ardhashastra. But to understand Kautilya's Ardhashastra, you keep this in mind, and now we see how Mauryan rulers behaved during 3rd century BCE. Is it clear up to here? If someone wants to write anything here, please let me know. Otherwise, I will go to Politico administration of Mauryans. After knowing this much, then we really appreciate whether Mauryans were well advanced in their time period or they were not advanced. All of you understood up to here? Shall I go to the next point? Yes. Kautilya's Ardhashastra. And he gave Saptanaga Theory. Saptanaga Theory. Mention Saptanaga Theory. According to Kautilya, a state should contain 7 elements. A state should contain 7 elements. You just draw this mind map. These 7 elements make a state very powerful. So what is the purpose of these 7 elements? State becomes powerful. Stability is ensured in the state. Welfare of people can be ensured. Prosperity of state. Even today also, if India wants to become a superpower, how India should behave, how India should be administered. In the present sense, if you want to make India superpower, again, state has to become very powerful. India has to be very stable. India is facing a lot of issues in Northeast, in Kashmir, in the form of Naxalism, in the heart of India itself. India should not have these disturbances. Then only India can become powerful. And there are so many people who are reeling under poverty, illiteracy, diseases. Indians should not fall into the trap of poverty, disease, illiteracy. If Indians are above all these, then India becomes powerful, India becomes superpower. Then wealth of country should be increased. Indian economy should be more stable. Unemployment should not be there. Then only India becomes powerful, India becomes superpower. And for that, what India has to, how India has to be followed? India has to follow the constitution. If constitution is saying something and administration is doing something, if this mismatch happens, disturbances will happen, prosperity will not happen, India cannot become superpower. According to Saptanaga theory, Kautilya says, if state follows this properly, it becomes very powerful. What are these 7 elements? First, the king. Any state should have king, and king should be powerful. We will write one by one how king should be there. But definitely, if there is no king, then that state will not become prosperous. In fact, state itself will not exist. That's why king should be there. And in 21st century, in modern time, how we have to see this? A stable government should be there. And if government is not stable, then India, forget about superpower. India will not, itself may not exist. Different invaders may come. In northeast border, some disturbances will happen with respect to neighbors. Neighbors will take the land of territory. That's why state itself will not exist. King should be powerful. In the present times, stable government, you can think. Then, are the head of the state. In the present time, this is president. Second one, Amatya. Amatya, ministers. Ministers should be there. These ministers will be allocated different departments and they have to follow that. Again, if the ministers are powerful, if ministers are more enlightened and they are very efficient, then state becomes powerful. Even today also, same thing applies today also. If ministers are not efficient, if ministers are corrupt, then state will not be strong. Then Janapada. Janapada. This means territory. Territory and its people. Territory has to be there. Without territory, how can you call it as a king? Territory should be there. Then, territory has to be fortified, or capital has to be fortified. This is called Durga. A strong fort should be there. Otherwise, enemies will easily attack the king and no state, no powerful state. Fort has to be very powerful one. Then, treasury, kosha. If state has to be powerful, then treasury has to be very powerful. Today in the concept like budget, we are talking about budget, but every year we see the budget deficit. There are different type of deficits: revenue deficit, fiscal deficit, primary deficit. In deficit, a state cannot become powerful. Always there has to be surplus. Then only we can improve the state administration. If we want to import something, we can easily import, but India is facing current account deficit. This deficit will always hinder the progress of the country. That's why we should not be in deficit, but we should be in surplus. Kosha, strong state, strong treasury is required. Then, justice system. Justice, it was called danda. Justice. This is very, very essential when it comes to state system. If any particular state is not a justice, if people are not getting justice in the state, people will revolt against the system. For example, in today's terminology, suppose if people are not getting sufficient representation in the parliament, people will revolt. If people are not getting justice on time, a crime took place, but people are not getting justice within time, then again people will show agitation or people will revolt against the state. That is why in today also, we see some of the crime activities are extrajudicial aspects. Why extrajudicial institutions are emerging? For example, in 1990s, underworld in Bombay. These things we see through the prism of criminal activities, but we have to see through the prism of state also. If people are not getting sufficient resources, or if people are not getting justice within the existing system, people will go for extrajudicial methods. And why extrajudicial killings are happening? In today also, it is very common. It is called, in other terminology, fake encounter. Why fake encounters are taking place, or why extrajudicial methods are happening? Because people are looking for instant justice. And there is other reason also. In the existing judicial system, there is a delay. And people are not believing the existing judicial system. People look for the alternatives, quick justice. These are all is happening because existing judicial system is not efficient and it is not delivering the justice on time. Whenever justice system is weak, then we see the criminal elements, we see extrajudicial institutions will emerge. Again, that goes against the welfare of the state. In the overall welfare of the state, that system goes against it. If a state has to be powerful, justice has to be. That is why in polity you are going to see judicial reforms. Why we are talking about often judicial reforms? You have to see, India is a state. If India has to be stable, prosperous, powerful, strong justice system should be there. And finally, neighbor. If neighbors are creating disturbance, suppose India, if Indian are getting disturbances from the neighbors, Pakistan, China, our always concentration goes towards the neighboring areas. Whether king or minister, everyone should think about how our borders, how to safeguard our borders. If our neighbors are peaceful, if neighbors are mitra, ally, then we will not worry about our neighbors. For example, Bhutan is one of the best neighbors India is having. Best friend, we will never worry about the boundary between India and Bhutan. But India and China always does disturbance. Our entire energy concentration goes towards this border. And this shock, 1962 war with India and China, that completely distracted our progress. This is our modern example. After independence, India got independence in 1947. And after 1950, Indian Constitution also came. We were going systematically 5-year plans. We were working on education, economy, infrastructure, and everything was going in order, and we were building the nation. Our concentration was to build the nation. But this disturbed in 1962. Already before that itself, we were having the fight with Pakistan. That disturbed for some time. In 1962, it completely distracted our resources. Whatever resources we are focusing on nation building, now it has to be directed towards the defense. And after immediately 3 years, 1965, once again, Pakistan-India war, again our attention goes to how to secure our borders. Only if our borders are secure, then only we are safe. Our concentration goes, instead of these developmental activities, goes to these war efforts. And once again in 1999, Kargil. So that's why our neighbor should be peaceful, otherwise a state will not become prosperous. And the 7th one is Mitra, ally. Ally. That's why in international relations, we are going to have a lot of friendship, military alliances or friendly relations. We want to be in friends with everyone. For example, we want to be friend with Russia also. We want friendship of America also. We don't want enmity. When it comes to Mitra, a state becomes powerful only if state have some kind of friends. If there are no friends for the state, enemies will attack the state, state will not exist. This is the theory. And he mentions Saptanaga Theory. Any state to be prosperous, these 7 elements should be followed. Now you write about a few points for everything. First one, king. Here you write, he called, that particular name is Swami. Swami, the king. Now he is giving how a king should be, then only how a state becomes powerful. And he says that monarchy. He is not talking about a republic, he is not talking about democracy, nothing. He wants monarchy. Because only a powerful ruler can ensure the stability of the state. Says monarchy. Monarchy should be the form of governance. And he says a king should be energetic. And if king is energetic, people also becomes more energetic. And he says if king is lazy, people becomes lazy. If he is energetic, people also become energetic. That's why king always should maintain his stature. King should always maintain the energy. Otherwise, it becomes negative factor for the state stability. Next, he says always king should be alert, diligent. Otherwise, enemies will attack, or ministers may not listen to you, people may not listen to you, then it affects the state stability. So this is how a king should be there. And how, when it comes to Mauryans, Ashoka, he followed paternalistic kingship. Paternalistic kingship. He took the title Devanampiya, dear to God. They projected themselves, Chandragupta Maurya, Bindusara, Ashoka, projected themselves as powerful monarchs. Powerful monarchs. And Ashoka particularly focused on welfare of people. So king should be very energetic, very diligent, should be concerned about the people, then only people will respect the king. This is how Saptanaga Theory, and this is how they behaved. Examples. Next one, Amatya. Minister. Minister should be there. Ardhashastra says there were two types of bodies. In today also we have Council of Ministers and Cabinet Ministers. Which is bigger one? Which body contains more number of ministers? Is it Cabinet Minister or Council of Ministers? Which is bigger body? Council of Ministers. It constitutes all the ministers in the government. Cabinet ministers are powerful ministers or important portfolios. Similarly, he also suggests there should be two bodies. One is Mantra Parishad and the second one Mantri Parishad. This is small consultative body and this is large body. And he mentioned Amatya. Amatya means, this is the general term used for high-ranking officials, counselors, department heads. This is general term, Amatya, in almost every department, heads of the departments. Then he mentions, continue in Amatya only, he mentions Purohita. A state should contain a Purohita. He was also called royal priest. Royal priest. And this royal priest should possess so many qualities. Anyone cannot become the royal priest because he is such an important person. He is advisor to the king. And this advisor, it's like in the present day, there are so many advisors to the prime minister, principal advisor, or you can say national security advisor. These are very, very professionals and they should contain so much knowledge in their respective fields. Similarly, Purohita, royal priest, and what are his qualities? He should be from a reputed family. He should be trained in Vedas. And he should have command over politics. And he should know about astrology so that he can read the omens. Kautilya is Brahmanical, and his method of looking at the state pervades in Ardhashastra. But Ashoka, whether Ashoka followed or not is secondary. But this is what Ardhashastra refers. He says this. But when it comes to Chandragupta Maurya, Kautilya himself is the minister, powerful one. He took the help of Kautilya only to enter into the royal office. He became the king and he is the royal priest. And if you go back to early Vedic time period, do you remember there were two royal priests? One is Vishwamitra, another one is Vasishtha. You can think like how early Vedic tradition, 1500 BC, in 1500 BC to 1000 BC, in early Vedic tradition itself, Purohita concept emerged, and that is continuing in 300 BC also. And in fact, it continues for rest of history. That is how Vedic period, how it is influencing the rest of the history of India. Chandragupta Maurya, in case of Chandragupta Maurya, we have Kautilya. When it came Bindusara, probably Kautilya continued because we don't have much references to Bindusara. We don't know about his military conquest also. We don't know about his administration also. We don't know about how he behaved in the day-to-day because we don't have reference. Later, Ashoka came. Now, Ashoka is one kind of person. He don't want to encourage any one particular religion. He is open to all religions. And in fact, Chandragupta Maurya also, he accepted Jainism. That means Mauryans, they patronized not only Brahmanism, they patronized non or unorthodox religions or heterodox religions. Not only Rigvedic or Vedic tradition, but they encouraged other non-Vedic traditions as well. Jainism, he himself became Jaina and he left his life by performing Sallekana. And Ashoka, he accepted Buddhism, but he wanted to appreciate all religions, whatever may be the ideology, whether Brahmanas, whether Buddhist, whether Jainese monks, Ajivakas, all the other sects, every sect, he wanted a separate kind of state where everyone follows their own religion. We can call a kind of secular policy. No religion dominates. Every individual is free to follow their own religion. And we don't know how effectively he implemented whatever he is saying here. But there is one particular tradition that there was a minister called Radha Gupta. He helped, like Kautilya helped Chandragupta Maurya, Radha Gupta helped Ashoka in becoming the ruler. According to Buddhist tradition, Ashoka did not directly succeed the throne of Bindusara. He had to fight with his brothers. We don't know how many brothers were there. Buddhist tradition says 99 brothers. But we don't know some of these numbers. It is always exaggerated when these accounts comes. Ashoka established 84,000 stupas. We don't know really 84,000 stupas were established by Ashoka or not. In early Vedic tradition, Sahasra, 1000 is very, very common. We don't know whether that 1000, Sahasra is very, very common terminology. Like 1000 cities in Vedic time period. We don't know what this 1000 means. Similarly, 84,000 stupas, we don't know really how many. Same is the case with this. Ashoka killed 99 of his brothers to enter into the throne. That means 99 figure, we don't know really. When it comes to later Vedic time period or medieval time period, for example, Aurangzeb fought with 3 of his brothers. Humayun fought with other 3 brothers. And so many, it is very, very common practice that, for example, in Mahabharata itself, Kauravas and Pandavas, they were fighting for the kingship. This fighting is there, but we don't know the numbers, how far. In medieval time period, we have cross references, many references, we can exactly see the numbers. But in ancient time, we don't know. Simply we can say that there was conflict. Radha Gupta helped Ashoka to enter into office. Yes, Mahavamsha. So this is Sri Lankan tradition. They have given these references. That is how, whether he followed in truly all these, we don't know. Ashoka is following this way. Next one, Janapada. We have seen king, we have seen Amatya, now coming to Janapada. Territory. Territory. Now you see the term, Janapada is very common. In early Vedic time period, Jana was important. In later Vedic time period, Janapada is important. By 600, Maha Janapadas emerged. In Kautilya Shastra, he is referring again Janapada. How important is it? Janapada. Why this territory is important? Because if you have a territory, then only you will get the income. State gets income. If larger is the territory, larger is the income. If small is the territory, small is the income. That's why every country, every kingdom wants to expand their territories. Magadha, one of the Mahajanapadas, and this Mahajanapada, they wanted to conquer more territories because more territories, more land, and more income of the state. Expanded, it conquered all the territories, Mahajanapada. State gets more income. And how state gets income? If more territory, more agriculture activities, more artisan activities, and it is not something new now. Even today also, we are calling it as expansionary policies. If you see in recent trends, in our own example, India and China having differences, and here in Doklam this side and Galwan Valley this side, recent conflict is going on. Chinese policies are considered as imperialist policies. Imperialist. In ancient times and up to 20th century, this expansionism is very common. But now every country is against this imperialism concept, expansion, imperialism. Or our Prime Minister also in one of the indirect references to China says, 21st century is the time period of Vikasvad, not Vistaravad. So 21st century is about development, not about the expansion. This is Indian ideology, but when it comes to Chinese ideology, they wanted to expand. Why they wanted to expand? The more the expansion, they get more lands, they get more resources, and if they get more resources in Himalayan region is very, very important for the minerals. As of now, unexplored. If they get some more tracts of Himalayas, they can explore in Himalayas, and Himalayas will give more natural resources, because Chinese population is growing and they want to extract some of these resources. Same is the case with, they are going in South China Sea also. South China is shared by other countries, neighboring countries, but China wants more territory, more control over it, because there are so many resources under the sea. They want to extract it. This was the ideology of ancient times, medieval times, but not the modern times. And at this time, state used to get the revenue from agriculture, artisan activities, mining activities, all the resources. If state is more, and more resources will come. That is why every state, every ruler wants to expand territories. Expansion is a part of the ideology itself. And this is the same reason whether Delhi Sultanate expansion, Alauddin Khilji expansion, Alexander expansion, Akbar expansion is same. British expansion, same thing. Mining activities, you can control the trade routes, you can control the ports, and so many activities takes place and so much development takes place. This is what Janapada. And now when it comes to Chandragupta Maurya, expanded, Bindusara, expanded, Ashoka also expanded his territory by conquering Kalinga. But Ashoka changed his policy after this. He don't want Bheri Gosha, but he want Dhamma Gosha. And he wanted Dhamma Vijaya. He wanted to expand his influence in an indirect, peaceful way. Not violent way, peaceful way. In modern terminology, if you use the army, that is hard power. and if you use ideology, and that is soft power. Ashoka used soft power to expand his influence in various territories. And today also, if you are having strong soft power, you can have trade relations, you can import, you can export, economic activities. Everything will flourish if your ideology matches with other countries' ideology, soft power. Otherwise, hardly you have to take the resources, hardly you have to take the roads, hardly you have to take. For example, now when it comes to China, China and Pakistan, as of now, they are maintaining good relations. China is giving a lot of economic help to Pakistan. That is soft power. But at any point of time in future, this soft power may turn into hard power. Because once Chinese assets are there in Pakistan, if Pakistan is not stable, automatically Chinese people are going to occupy Pakistan territory. That is reality. That is why our Indian foreign minister, external affairs minister used to say that our neighbors, he used to caution our neighbors that don't fall into this debt trap. Initially, debt will come, later military will come. Because in the name of development, money will flow. Then once, if you are not able to repay it back, then army will come and take your resources. That is going to happen. That is hard power. That is in the modern time period. But in ancient times, following in 3rd century BC, this soft power is very, very advanced in nature, very, very great development in 3rd century BC itself. That's why Ashoka became great not for the military expansion, but because of these policies. Alexander also historians call Alexander the Great. Ashoka also we call Ashoka the Great. But how this term great added to both of them? Purely Alexander the Great added because of his military conquest. But in case of Ashoka, the terminology added because of not for his military conquest, but his Dhamma Vijaya. Later in medieval time period, for Akbar also we use the term Akbar the Great for expansion and also this type of policies. In UPSC, 2 years or recent one, there was a question in our history optional. Alexander is considered as the great, but is really the great applies to him? So likewise, there was one question. After few classes, I am going to explain that particular, because after understanding these things, we can really understand that. Dhamma Vijaya. So this is what continuous expansion he says, but when it comes to Ashoka, he modified that particular concept in a different way. This is what exactly you see that what Ardhashastra is referring, what rulers were doing. Next one, Durga. 4th one, Durg. So if question says how far the Ardhashastra policies were implemented by the Mauryan rulers, critically analyze. The moment you see the critically analyze word, you have to see the reality what happened, what theoretically what Ardhashastra was explaining. Next one, Durga. It is crucial to defense. Fortress is very important. Then the remaining things is very common. Kosha, treasury, then Danda, justice system. And when it comes to justice, this Kosha we will deal separately because the state control over economic activities. Over economic activities. That we will separately deal tomorrow. And justice system. And when it comes to justice system, Ardhashastra says for Brahmanas, a separate law. And for Vaishyas, next separate law. And Shudras, separate law. So this is justice based on birth. If there is a crime, if the same crime is offended by or done by Brahmanas, a simple form of punishment. If the same crime is done by Shudra, a severe form of punishment. This is what Ardhashastra. And this Ardhashastra tradition you will see in Manusmriti also, other Brahmanical justice books. But when it comes to Ashoka, he followed uniform law. Whoever may be that, and he followed similar. This is what today we are calling this equality before law. So this concept, equality before law, this particular form of justice system is not equal before law. Different person by birth, they are getting some privileges. This is what French Revolution also attacked. Social religious reformers in India also attacked the same system. But that time itself, king himself, Ashoka himself, followed uniform law. Again, critically analyze means this is what Ardhashastra is referring, but Ashoka is doing. That is why how far these principles followed by the rulers is questionable. Next, seventh one, Mitra. Seventh one, Mitra, friendly relations with other countries. Friendly relations with other countries for stability. And when it comes to Ashoka Dhamma, here we are going to see all these things separately. Kosha or state control over economy itself is a question, and Ashoka policies itself is a question, and also foreign relations of Mauryans is also another important question. One by one, tomorrow we will see. Is it clear, students, up to here? Today's topic is very important to understand rest of our history, Politico administration. And even the present day constitution also take the references of ancient India. And in fact, modern world history is completely destroyed these old norms. It is, even India is also not exception. We also modified some of these elements. But at that particular point of time, it was given in those circumstances. But we cannot apply 3rd century BC rules to 21st century. But this is what in 3rd century ideology. But even in 3rd century itself, rulers did not follow some of these ideologies which are not equal. Clear? Understood up to here? If you are clear in this today's concept, it becomes very easy to understand rest of the time period. Thank you very much. Tomorrow we will meet.